in the deep Abzu on the edge of a cliff, south of his abode in the north, and the peaks, and the Twin Peaks or something like that, something like the Twin Peaks or the peak further up in Africa. And then you realize that Adam's calendar is actually Enki's calendar that is linked to Great Zimbabwe and the Great Pyramid, because they all built exactly on the 31 degrees east longitudinal line, or along the 31 degrees longitudinal line. And there is a very specific passage in Zecharia Sitchin's translations that refers to this, and it's spectacular when you find these kind of cross-references.
Absolutely. And I remember my last question to Zecharia. I said, Zecharia, many people don't know that in 1983, NASA astronomers found a 10th planet in our solar system and are so sure about it that the only thing left is to name it. Is this Nibiru, and why isn't this information more public? And his answer was,
ask the government. Well, I suppose the question is, what would be the consequences if it's admitted?
Yes. Can you speculate?
Yeah, well, I don't know. If I were responsible, as a government is, I might also hesitate in being so candid. There are all kinds of consequences, political, religious, I suppose, especially religious are the touchy issue here.
Do you have any comment about this?
I normally steer away from the discussion of Nibiru because there are so many stories flying around about Nibiru and the 10th planet and so forth. And, you know, is it part of a brown dwarf solar system? Is it just a rogue planet? Has it got its own little solar system that, you know, with other moons and things around it? Is it a planet that was stolen from another solar system, captured accidentally? All these kind of questions. And I think, personally, I don't have anything that resonates with me right now. And I go very strongly on gut feeling. Right. Things have to resonate with me, and it has to fall into place with all the other information that I've got for me to be able to say, okay, this sounds like it could be the thing. Let me explore that. At this stage, I believe that there is a planet like Nibiru, or planet called Nibiru. Where it is and when we're going to see it, I'm not sure. If it is coming from the south, like a lot of the translations suggest, that it comes from the south, so you can only really see it approaching from the South Pole, or if you're very, very low in the southern hemisphere, then it'll be a surprise. And then, obviously, the mysterious questions come up. Why? What is the Southern Pole Telescope doing? Is that
right.
what they're looking at? All these interesting questions pop up, and the information seems to be so well guarded and so well controlled that when you see information leak out that claims to be information regarding Nibiru and, you know, images from the Southern Pole Telescope and so forth, I would love to believe that, but at this stage I don't have enough information to say, okay, well, that's definitely it, you know.
It's a minefield of misinformation out there, so you have to really walk with care. But then you think of NASA restarting their telescopes in Argentina and Chile, and you have the Vatican with their largest telescope in right here, very close to me in Arizona. It really makes you wonder what they're looking for. But do you think the Anunnaki left, or did they, or at least some of them stayed, and they may be in control and responsible for our global condition today?
I'm convinced of that. There is no reason why all the Anunnaki would have left. You know, once the world was destroyed by the flood, their need for gold just went up. They needed more gold. You know, the big question I'm always asked in my presentations: why the gold? Where do they need the gold?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Once again, that becomes probably a one-year debate because
right.
the gold itself is such a mysterious origins. But and we can come back to that again, because I've got some interesting information for you about gold and its links to the planet and its energetic fields and so forth, which may not have been discussed on your show before.
Oh, absolutely.
What it seems to me that after the flood, the world was so deeply destroyed, so completely destroyed by the waters, and we can see the evidence of that in the ruins of southern Africa and South Africa, the sedimentation and so forth. Not only that, I believe that the geophysical forces of whatever caused the flood, and if it was indeed the planet Nibiru that came so close to the Earth, that's what the Sumerian tablets suggest, that it caused the Antarctic ice sheets to slide into the ocean and caused these giant tidal waves that swept across the world like a giant, rubber band, moving from south to north and probably bouncing back again, and maybe even up again, destroying the world. After that, the Anunnaki needed more gold, and that's very clearly spelled out in the Sumerian tablets. And the verification of the Sumerian tablets is a very interesting and an important thing. And once again, there are little fragments of hints and clues that I'm starting to pick up that make me believe absolutely that the Sumerian tablets are accurate and true. And I'll talk about some of those as well. The gold thing after the flood, once again, if it is true that Nibiru comes in and out very quickly around the sun, and once it's on its way out, those that want to get on it better get on it, otherwise they're going to miss the bus.
Right.
So those Anunnaki that wanted to get off planet did that, and the others remained to continue with the gold mining operations because they needed more gold. It is at that point in time, after the flood, some 12,000 or so years ago, that we suddenly start seeing the rapid urbanization and rise of civilizations, or what we call civilization today, but is far removed from the natural order of things. And your very first question is how are we being controlled and get a job and all that stuff. That, in my opinion, started after the flood, when the Anunnaki, as the Sumerian tablets say, when heaven was lowered to earth, when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and kings and priests were appointed, and people were divided into groups and civilizations and taught how to write and how to arrange themselves, organize themselves, and the control systems started to be implemented, the same control systems that we are suffering from today.
Did the real controllers choose and appoint the elite high priests and royal bloodlines as their managers?
Yeah, that's how I see it. I see the Anunnaki remnants, or those that remained, appointed their leaders on earth. They chose them from among the people. Abraham would have been one such individual, and various others in Sumeria and so forth. And they appointed those as the gatekeepers and those guys that would make sure that things were done and would control the other humans. They started the whole practice of temple building and worshipping real and sacrifice and offerings to the gods, and the temples all over the Near East and were built. Hundreds and thousands of temples were built to the different gods, and so the gods then would be like every god. There would be a god responsible or somebody that would come to every town and every city, every village, and there would be a temple for them built by the people. There'd be specific instructions of what food they needed to serve them, how to serve that food, how to prepare it. It's a spectacular story, but what I find fascinating is the whole link to the Sumerians and the Sumerian tablets and the Sumerian translations. It is now absolutely clear to me that these Sumerian people, since we now believe they were the first people, or the evidence shows that they were the first civilization that acquired the art of writing and capturing the information, they were also then given the first basic laws and to write down, and the legal systems that they started to write down that were then passed on and inherited by from the Sumerians to the Assyrians to the Egyptians but the Egyptians seem to have been evolving slightly separately with similar kind of structures that were being put in place. But then from the Assyrians to the Greeks and the Greeks to the Romans, and then the Romans rewrote the law completely, and then they created the whole religious scenario with the Catholic Church in 325, and you start seeing the laying down of the rules and the control systems that were slowly but surely being pulled in to control the human race more and more and more, until we get to today, where the control is so extreme that you can't even cross borders, and we have been so separated and segregated as the human race that in the words that we use around our lifestyle, think about this, we no longer live in the country or in houses and we live in apartments, apart from each other, apartments.
Right.
That's how segregated we've become.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of gold, at the beginning of the show, we talked about the holy trinity of human questions. Now, there's a holy trinity of common denominators of human history: gold, slavery, and the feather serpent, or the wing-flying serpent. What have you found?
That is what I normally call my little special holy trinity of common denominators, that you cannot separate human history from those three aspects. Gold, we know already. What I find very strange about gold, as we know, gold is the eternal obsession of humans. But even more interestingly, and this is the interesting thing that you've got to look at, it's the human obsession with gold is really interesting, because it seems that humans inherited their obsession with gold from their gods.
Right.
And this is where you start seeing the very obvious distinction between God with a big G, the divine creator and the source of the stuff in the universe, and the gods with a small g, the malicious advanced beings that arrived on planet looking for gold, and they found it in abundance. And the one interesting reference to that is in the Bible, in Genesis 2. People read this stuff all the time. Preachers, millions of preachers around the world preach about this, but they don't stop and think about God's obsession with gold. And in Genesis 2, when Adam had just been created, God had just created the universe and all things in it, and then created Adam. He had not yet created Eve. Eve had not yet been fashioned from his rib. Okay, so Adam is all alone on planet Earth, this vast, beautiful planet filled with animals and other beautiful stuff. And then God starts to tell Adam about this land called Havilah, where the land is good, the water is good, and there is gold. And you got to ask yourself, okay, hold on, buddy, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Who is this God that is so obsessed with gold? And it's at that precise moment that you realize we are dealing with a God with a small g in that specific instance, and not the divine creator of the universe and all things in it. And then immediately after that, I mean, Adam had hardly been created, and they start a family. Then Eve comes along, and they start this family. How that family happened, we're not quite sure. And very shortly after that, they start having slaves. Just suddenly out of nowhere, these slaves, they take slaves from, well, where the hell do these slaves come from? Where did they get these people that they've enslaved to do their work for them? I find that an extremely unnatural activity from a new species on a planet that is very low in their level of consciousness, that has very little ability to think for itself, and yet they go and find slaves and create